Bienvenido a todos and welcome back. In this video I'll be showing you how I created this amazing Colombian inspired shoulder satchel. I created a pattern piece from an A4 piece of paper, cut it in half and then placed it on top of some pattern fabric where I cut 2 pieces. I used empty alcohol bottles from work because as a bartender I don't know, I just collect bottles. And I used it as a paperweight as I don't own any pins, but it did its job, so definite recommendation. I then used that same pattern piece to cut out 2 pieces of interfacing. For those of you who do not know what interfacing is, it's basically an added layer which you can place on the inside of clothes or fabric just to create it a bit more rigid. Now, taking those old pair of jeans, what I did was I cut out the outer seams and the inner seam. I left the inner seam all in one piece, so by the end of it you should have 3 long strips. Taking this time, I'd like to explain why I'm doing a Colombian inspired bag. I want to pay tribute to my heritage as my mum is from Colombia, and I'm just fascinated with the fashion, the tradition and the culture out there. You will see that the reason why I'm doing a bag is in tribute to the YU artisans who hand make their own bags, and the pattern you will see resembles a very traditional hat worn by the farmers or agriculture workers in Colombia. Now, bringing back those jeans that we cut up, what I'm going to do is we are going to cut out 2 pieces using the same pattern piece that we made earlier to create the outside of our bag. And by the end of it, you should have 3 pairs of squares, all in different fabrics. And finally, because we want to create an outer pocket on the front side of our bag, we are going to use the pocket that was already on our jeans and cut that right out. What I'll be doing next is optional, and if you just want to create a basic bag, then by all means skip forward a little while. But I just wanted to add some more decoration and to add more of the Colombian-ness to my bag. I sewed the pocket down, and then I arranged the 3 colours which appear on the Colombian flag and sewed them down to the bottom corner of my bag. What I'm doing now is I'm preparing the fabric to have the interfacing put on. The interfacing that I'm using is iron-on, and the way you can tell which side needs to go on which is the shiny side of interfacing will always be the one that has the glue on it. So it's better to put that side facing onto your fabric because otherwise it's not going to stick. I'm cut off a few edges of my interfacing just so it would fit better and so it'll be easier to sew together later on. And always when ironing on interfacing, use a piece of scrap fabric so you don't ruin the iron or get your project stuck to the iron as well. Something additional that I did was I also folded down the seams just so they'll be easier to sew. But I also realised that if I were to be putting things inside the bag, I wanted there to be enough space to hold quite a few things. So I added extra fabric which I cut from the legs of our jeans and sewed them onto the side. So in theory, you should be creating a cube-like or 3D rectangle. So those 3 strips that we cut from the seams of our jeans, you should have 2 which are the same size and then 1 that's slightly longer. I used the one that's slightly longer to measure how far down or how long I wanted the strap of my bag and cut it to the right size. The next thing was to join the 2 shorter ones together to create 1 long one. I cut along the seams diagonally and then fit them together almost like a puzzle piece, just so it would be easier to sew and to create the border of the strap that I wanted. Now, laying both of the tiny little skinny straps along the side of my pattern fabric, I decided to cut a wide strap. The pattern of my fabric was pretty easy to cut freehand because of how geometric it was, so I didn't even need a ruler. I just cut out to the length that I wanted it to be. Now, the whole point of these seams is to create a fancy little border against the strap, just so the fabric doesn't fray, because this pattern fabric was woven and it seemed to fray and get mess absolutely everywhere. This was definitely the most tedious and most intricate part of the project. However, it does add a detail to it and I'm absolutely in love with how it turned out. Bringing your project back, you should have it inside out in a way. And to make yourself feel better, just to see that you are going on the right track, you can turn it inside out and have a look and see what it looks like. Using those 2 inner patterned pieces, you want to put them right sides together and then sew them along the edges. This will be your lining, so the fabric on the inside of your bag, and it just gives it more of a finished look. What we're going to create now is we're going to take some of that extra side seam that we cut off and create 2 small loops. These will be attached to the side of our bag through the jump rings and make it easier for the strap to hang on to the satchel. I placed the loop inside, so when I sewed along the side of the bag that they would be shut or just look a little bit more neat. This has got to be another tricky part. The zip, I'll admit, I had to do this a few times and sew seams all the way around, realise it was the wrong, and then had to do it again. But after trial and error, you want to place the seam inside. Okay, so I'm basically just going to draw a diagram of how the zip should be. Because the way that I could describe it is you need to imagine the lining and the bag kissing each other inside out. Sounds super weird, but it works. So you want to sew along the sides of the zip, and do make sure that you do leave some space so you can push your bag the right way out. It's because I didn't do that and I was stuck for about half an hour trying to stuff my bag through a tiny little gap. Another thing I did was to seal the ends of the zip so the zip wouldn't fall off, but that was just an added detail. Something that I added, and was just something really fun, was I had some ribbon which I bought and created a little keychain. So using that same loop technique that we did for the sides of the bag, we're basically going to do the exact same thing but for the belt. But with the corners of the belt, as they are square, we're going to create a triangle by folding them over and then closing that triangle up. Now, to attach the belt to that loop, I basically wrapped the loop around the tip of the triangle and then sewed a square and an X just to keep it secure and make sure that the bag wasn't going to fall off. And all you have to do now is repeat that same process, but on the other side. And that brings us to the end. And if you are following this tutorial, you should now have your very own Colombian-inspired satchel. I was so excited to do this project, and I just felt overjoyed that I could tribute my heritage and kind of modernize the culture in a fashion trend. If you do like this video and if you would like to see any more DIY tutorials, I had so much fun creating this one and I would not be shy to create another. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but until then, ciao queridos.